Good afternoon. Welcome to Common Talk. I'm your host, J Jack, here at the booth or at the mic alone today, but we're going to make it do what it does. We're going to talk a little bit about politics, a little bit about education, a little about juvenile justice, a little bit about everything in the little time that we have allotted today. We had anticipated a special guest today, but things happen, life happens, situations happen, so we got to keep moving on. Start off talking a little bit about the political arena. As you know, Hillary Clinton won the primary in Illinois. Bernie Sanders his showing was respectable, but he still didn't pull it off. And then there's Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. What can we say? Politics makes strange bedfellows. We look at these things and we wonder what happened. How did we get that far? How do we go from really an institution that is supposed to be somewhat sacred, somewhat sophisticated, and somewhat civilized, but now we have the situations where nobody knows what's going on. It's like a circus. It's like a three-ring circus, to be exact. We have Hillary Clinton, who appears to be the heir apparent to the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States. And then we have Bernie Sanders, who marched with King. We have Donald Trump, billionaire, so he says. There's some discrepancy about that. And we also have Ted Cruz, who seems to have kind of whitewashed himself. Ted Cruz is a minority, even though he was born in Canada. I guess he's got his citizenship in the United States, and there's some question about that through Mr. Trump. But as we know, Mr. Trump is not the most reliable person as it relates to citizenship, as he did back in the day question the citizenship of our current president, Barack Obama. And so we look at the political arena today, even in the local arena, where we looked at the state's attorney's race with Anita Alvarez and Kim Foxx, and we look at the race, I can't recall the specific district, between Kim Duncan and the other young lady who actually beat him out. And we wonder, is that something that makes sense? Is that something that we should really, really take a little more seriously as we pursue these things, and looking at the environments and the situations that we're in that occur during those times? So what we're going to do, we're going to play this little music right now, take a quick break, and then we'll be back to talk about those things and many more. Well, that was a quick interlude. I hit the wrong button. That's what happened. Things happen, when you expect a guest, you got to go with the flow. So we're going to do that. And what we're going to do is just kind of dissect a little bit of the political arena and the political spectrum, as it is called sometimes. So when we look at the political race as it relates to the president, what are some of the significant things that the presidents need to look out for? Now, you have the grand things. Of course, we talk about the economy as well as education. And I think foremost on my mind is gun control. Is that really feasible? And if so, what can we do about it? How can we curtail all of this violence that is occurring in our society today, particularly in the urban and the inner city areas where we see such a spike in violence, gang violence, person-on-person violence, race-on-race violence, interracial violence. There's violence everywhere. You see violence on TV. Children are exposed to violence in such a huge number that does it really affect them? We're going to have a psychologist on later down the line. We're setting those people up to really take a deep, penetrating look at how this violence and how our violent society, or the perpetration of violence in our communities and on TV and in the movies and on the radio and in the music, how that affects the mindset of youngsters, young adults, children, and even those toddlers, because now you see toddlers shooting up bang bang. I mean, when we were kids, we had cap guns, and we thought everybody wanted to be a cowboy. So you bought a cap gun and you bought the hat, and we played cowboys and Indians. Now, to be politically correct, we have to say cowboys and Native Americans. And so We want to look at those things and how the political arena is addressing those issues. Now, I've watched several debates, a lot of the Republican debates. I've watched the Democratic debates also, but I was really in tune to the Republican debates because I really wanted to hear something of substance from them to say that they are really making a difference or really tuned in to what is going on in America. They talk quite a bit about the foreign issues and things that are occurring in the other areas, things that are occurring globally, wars, places that maybe we should be in or maybe we shouldn't be in, but they tend to focus on that. Donald Trump wants to build a wall to keep illegal immigrants out. Ted Cruz, even though he does not concur with building a wall, he is still in agreement with something that should be done as it relates to curtailing the entrance of illegal aliens. Now, from a standpoint of people of color, especially our Hispanic brothers and sisters, and Ted Cruz as well as Mark Rubio being a part of that culture, are they really taking the time to address the issues that affect their own family members or those that are close to them? Do they really look in deep perspective as to what can be done to ensure that everyone is treated fair and equitably? I don't believe they really relate to the culture in which they were reared from. And so, as we look at the political spectrum, as we look at these guys that are doing these things in the political, especially the presidential race, are they making a difference? Are they hitting the points that people want to hear? And I think what's important to note is that the people that are affected by their policies or soon be policies often have a skewed vision or skewed view of what these politicians are bringing forth because they're not addressing poverty, that are not addressing the hunger situation, the homeless situation. They have rarely, pardon me, addressed the educational aspects of what we're going through in this community or in the community at large. They have not addressed those core issues, and unfortunately, the people that it affects are not the ones that are showing up to the polls where they could really make a difference. They're addressing the Supreme Court nomination, and I'll get into that in a minute, but I also want to address the violence, as I said earlier. The guns. What can we do about the guns? You know, you have pro gun controls, you have an NRA, and you have people that believe that the gun situation is something that should be eliminated, and it can be eliminated. You look at other countries that are on par with America, maybe not as sophisticated or advanced as America, but maybe they are. Their gun control laws are different. I was listening to a program and reading some literature. I believe it's in North America, or Southern America, or Central America, where they have great gun laws. You're not allowed to have a gun in certain instances. You can't have a gun in other instances. And if you have a gun, it has to be purchased with a case, with a lockable case. And we look in the news in the last few days, of weeks, months, and years, and we see a spike in the accessibility of our youngsters, our in particular our babies, who are getting hold of weapons, particularly guns, handguns to be specific, and they're doing harm to themselves or others. How many times in the recent months have we heard of a young person getting a hold of a gun, purchased legally or illegally? We don't know in all instances, and they either harm themselves or shoot someone else or create an environment that's not safe for them. And in the gravest of instances, they have either killed someone or killed themselves. How long can we go on like this as a society? How long can we continue to ignore those problems? What do we do? I don't have the answer, so please feel free if you are tuned in and you want to talk to me here on Common Talk on Intellectual Radio. Please feel free. 708-223-8953. 708-223-8953. Love to hear from you. And getting back to the gun situation, so many weapons are in our communities now that youth and young people and babies are getting a hold of these things and they're shooting. Innocent people are dying. There was a young girl the other day, either yesterday or the day before, who was sitting in her home, the place you should be most secure, playing as youngsters do, maybe watching TV, maybe on the computer, maybe doing something that was totally innocent, and a gun goes through her window, ricochets through something, and shoots her in the head. Now she's fighting for her life. Another instance, another young boy, I believe 7 or 8 years old, maybe younger, maybe a little older, was a victim of gun violence. And the stories go on and on and on and on. And we keep perpetuating this as to there's not a real problem. And then you look at the statistics and you look at the reports that come from the Chicago Police Department as well as the national um, entities that report on these things. And in some instances, they say that there's a decline in crime, there's a decline in violent crimes. But if you're in that community or if you're in that household, let's be specific, crime in your household is 100% alive. Crime in your community is at a high percentage. So to say, hey, crime is down, but it's affecting those neighborhoods and those areas in the urban areas that are the least able to speak for themselves, the least have the least amount of resources, the least amount of interaction, the least amount of political power. And so we have a responsibility to inform, but also to hold our elected officials accountable for those things and have them speak out about those things. I want to talk about the police superintendent issue in a bit, but I still want to stay on this gun issue and I want to stay on this violence issue. There used to be a time when we'd march, we get together, we convene, we protest, we'd write, we do something in our community. I think we tend to be disenfranchised. We tend to be so discouraged by the way the system is at this time that our motivation is totally at a standstill. I was encouraged when I saw the young people when we had some police issues, the McDonald issue, the issue in Ferguson, Missouri, and elsewhere throughout the country, where you saw young people getting involved, young becoming a voice, becoming a catalyst for a movement. We've been kind of dormant, if you really think about it, since the late 60s when Dr. King, Malcolm, Medgar Evans, and people of that sort, and the Black Panthers and organizations, which really took a pride and took a stance in helping to move us forward. There's been kind of a lull since that time. And we're looking at almost like the children of Israel, 40-year um, drought, so to speak, of 40 years of wandering and not making as much progress as a group of people as we could. And that's something we need to take into consideration. What do we do? How do we do it? Where do we do it? Who do we do it for? Who do we do it with? And how can we be effective? And that's a question we all need to ask ourselves as a community, as an individual, as a citizen of the United States of America. What can we do to ensure that we have longevity as a society and as a culture, and specifically as a people? We have an innate tendency to forget and forgive. And I don't have anything against that, but I don't want us to forget and forgive when we are not achieving the goals that were set forth for us by people that sacrifice quite a bit for us. They put in place things that will hopefully take us to the next level as our generations increase. And now we find that our generation is less literate than the generation before. And the odds are the generation to come is going to be less literate than the generation that's current. So is it drugs? Is it the lack of exposure? Is it the lack of resources? Is it the food? Is it the food deserts? Do we not have enough nutritional input in our diets, enough nutritional education, enough nutritional understanding so that we can allow ourselves to be healthy in body and mind, because they're all come together in one part? Is that something we can do as a culture, as a people, to ensure that our children are healthy? Because, when children go to school and they're hungry, they're not going to produce, they're not going to perform at maximum. And so what we have is a society that is weakened by the common core elements that all should have in the society, a free society such as the United States of America. We're the richest society in the world, the richest society that the world has ever known. Yet we have people sleeping on Lower Wacker Drive in America. We have children going to bed hungry in America. We have children that are undernourished in America, undereducated in America, under medicated in America. They don't have the resources in America. Land of the free, home of the brave. Yes, but also we have to remember we're the land for a fee, and we were also the home of the slave. And in some instances, we're still the home of a slave. And enslavement to poverty, enslavement to lack of resources, enslavement to lack of proper education, enslavement to the infrastructure, enslavement to the building, the gentrification of neighborhoods, enslavement for so many things that the shackles have not yet been released, but it's on us to take back the reins. Take back our community from the bottom up. There used to be a time in our communities where all of the businesses were black owned, or all of the businesses, or a great majority of the businesses had some black ownership or a black connection. You go in our communities now, the nail shops are not black owned. The beauty supply shops are not black owned. The cleaners are not black owned. The ice cream shops, the fast food locations, the fried chicken industry, things of that nature. The only true and lasting black staple in our community is the men's haircut, the men's barber shop. You can always go in the community and notice that there are barber shops and they are black owned. Even the women's hair salons, they have transitioned into a different culture that is now being responsible for the care of our sisters' hair. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that, but where's our diversity? Where is our pride? Where is our responsibility to keep those things in line and in our community so we can pass them down from generation to generation, and we can pass those skill sets to another generation where they'll be able to sustain themselves? Nothing wrong with diversity, nothing wrong with inclusion, nothing wrong with that. But we have to do as we are told when we get on the airplane. You know, when the flight attendant, which we never seem to pay attention to, she gets in the middle of the aisle right before takeoff or right in the midst of takeoff, and she gives these demonstrations and gives us direction on if we lose cabin pressure, do this, do that. And then she holds up the oxygen and she says something very pointed and very important. If you lose cabin pressure, take the oxygen mask, put it on yourself first. If you're with a small child or elderly person or someone that cannot help themselves, then you attend to them. The reason being that if you don't put the oxygen tank or mask on yourself first, you'll fumble around, you'll lose consciousness trying to accommodate the youngster or the person that is in need, and you will not be able to sustain them because now you have not given yourself the resources or the energy or the things you need to be able to help someone else. So now you all perish. So we have to treat our society, treat our community the same way. We have to start building inside of our community. We have to start garnering the resources, putting the resources in place, coming together, and as opposed to having one or two little small entities get together, elect an official representative of our entities so that we can go out and become that vital part of the community that we need. Now we put together something that has stability and it is a foundation to build upon. So now we come together and we have many people working together for a common cause or a common direction that we want to go in, and we now build upon that and we pull in other resources and other people. And so now our power block has increased. Our power and our way of communicating, our way of handling business, our buying power has been increased in order for us to be able to be a vital part of the community. Now we can take over community. We can own blocks. We can own the stores that are being taken over by people that are not from our community and are not leaving resources in our communities. Those things have to happen in order for us to sustain ourselves, to grow, to prosper, and to be able to leave things for the future generations. In our communities, we don't own anything over there. Gentrification is alive and well. You look down 63rd Street on the south side of Chicago, you look at Madison on the west side of Chicago, you look at Austin on the west side of Chicago, as well as some of the others, 47th Street and some of the old vital, historically African-American areas they are being gentrified. And so the people that built those communities, or the people that um, are part of those communities, that have been a part of those communities, are now forced to flee because they cannot sustain themselves when the value of the property has increased, but the income value has decreased, or the lack of jobs and lack of opportunities, the lack of proper training, the lack of programming, the lack of whatever you want to say, there's a lack. And the folks that are really the ones that should be building those communities up are forced to go, and the children don't have the luxury or the opportunity or the privilege or whatever you want to call it to learn from their elders. I heard a statement years ago, and they said, where's the best resource? And they said, well, it's in the cemetery. And I had to scratch my head. I didn't get that at the time. I said, because a lot of the culture that we have, a lot of the education, a lot of the influence, a lot of the things that build our culture were buried in the ground. And so then you don't have anybody to learn from it. I was grateful. I have a sister who does a lot of crafting, and she was able to learn from her elders and then take that craft and grow upon it. And she does such excellent things that will amaze you, from building things by hand to making crochet and knitting things that look like they came out of Saks Fifth Avenue. But unfortunately, no one is taking that up with her so that they can learn and pass it on. And so we have a responsibility to learn from our history and learn from those who have come before us in order to produce a package or produce a product that is going to allow us to sustain our community. So we have to look at architectural things. We have to look at construction. We have to look at those things that are going to be vital in our community, because the land is not going away. They may put something on the land, they may take it away from the land, but the land is not going away. It is not by coincidence, and I do say that you look on certain parts of the city, rich land, I may add, and they have vacant buildings, or they have buildings that have sat dormant for decades. No activity, no movement, nothing occurred from those buildings, or nothing happens on those buildings from the last of the 70s until now. That's nearly 40 years ago. But now you see they're tearing them down, or they're gutting them. They're doing some kind of renovation to them, and the building that was once $400, the people are gone, and now it becomes a $200,000 and up condominium in the same neighborhood that it was in less than a decade ago. So we have to learn from that. We have to get involved. We have to talk to our elected officials. We have to do research, which is not always easy because you want to have the resources. But the public library is a great place to learn about some things. They offer classes, they offer resources, they offer uh, areas where you can learn and you can get some information, and it's free of charge. And I think we need to promote those type of things. We need to have library days. We need to have folks in the community that are able to take children and learn. Children, they don't use bibliography cards and things of that nature anymore. They have everything on the computer, and then granted, you can go to Google or some of the other entities, or Wikipedia and things like that, and press a button, and all of the information you want is right at your fingertip. But we still have to look at it. We still have to engage with it. We still have to make sure that those things are being exposed to our youngsters, even our adults. We have to expose these things to our community in order for us to move forward to the next level. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about our educational system. As you know, last Friday was a furlough day, which historically was Good Friday, but it became on the books as a furlough day, and the teachers union is very upset about that. And now there's impending walkout scheduled for this Friday, and the children are going to be the ones affected. I believe that teachers deserve pay, decent pay, a well paying position. I mean, they put a lot into that. A lot of people are not trying to be teachers like they once were. The respect factor, the pay factor, the correlation between educating a youth or young person to brain surgery, or being a lawyer, or being some high profile type of entertainer, There's no different. I mean, no variance or a big variance in that. And our teachers have to have that respect because it takes a lot to be bothered or deal with a youth that may have some emotional problems, that may have some physical problems or some physical complications, or even a youngster that may be in a situation where they're kind of confused or they have some behavioral issues or there's some things going on at home and the teacher has to sit there and deal with them all day long. And so I just encourage us as a society, especially in the city of Chicago and surrounding areas, that we do encourage our teachers, we support our teachers, we allow them to demand the things that they feel they need in order to provide the best and the quality education for our children. It's so vital that our children get quality educations, and it starts at a young age. It starts when they're young, it starts when they're babies, and it proceeds. You know, you got to get a kid now in the Head Start, preschool, or whatever they're calling it these days, and by the time they go to kindergarten, they know the ABCs. They can read a little bit. They know the numbers to 100. There's some core things that children need to know now in order to compete in this global society. You know, it's no longer that you have to compete with the neighborhood. You have to compete with the city, the country, and now globally with the world in order to get those measures of success that you need so desperately in order to be a vital and productive citizens in these United States. So as we look at the schools, the deterioration in some of the schools, the closing of some schools, the renaming of some schools or the reclassification rather of some schools, as Dr. Forte, who was here with us a few weeks back, indicated that there are a variety of schools, charter schools, regular schools, vocational schools, and all various ways to educate our youth and our children. So we have a responsibility to take this seriously because if we do not, then we have a problem down the line. We're going to be visiting these youngsters in the hospitals, in the jails, in the institutions, in the areas of mental health and things of that nature. So if we can get the support for our educators that is so greatly needed in order to at least provide them with the tools, with the resources. A lot of teachers still purchase books and supplies out of their own pocket. They don't get reimbursed for that, but our children are at such a deficit in certain schools that they have no choice but to go in their own pockets or to solicit sponsorships or to solicit people to donate items so that the children can just get an education that's on par with where they should be at a national and even a global ranking. So it's so highly important that we continue to fight and we continue to support our educational efforts because once a child gets to a certain age, statistics, studies have shown, data is substantiating this, that once they get behind, it's so hard to catch up. I recall when I was a youngster, the hardest thing in the world for me to learn was long division. It took me forever to learn long division. I did not get it. I tried to get it. It would just look like it was a foreign language to me. And once someone sat down with me over and over and over again, we made the mistakes and we put it together, and I finally conquered long division. I had a sense of pride because I had achieved something. But the problem was everybody else was on polynomials, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and all that stuff. And I was just proud to say I learned long division. And so I had to do what is called catching up. That meant I had to study a little more. I had to garner resources. I had to do these things to get hopefully on par with the other students. And of course, you never do because once you had a deficit, the catching up takes so much energy out of you that once you get to possibly or close to where you should be, you're exhausted mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and all other things. And so it's very important that we capture these things at a young age. And I think our educators are aware of these things and they just want to provide a quality education for our young people. They want to provide quality resources. They want to make sure that they're able to compete in this global economy so that when these youngsters get out of high school, elementary school, high school, they have an opportunity to go on to higher learning, whether it be through a college, or university, or a vocational or trade school. They have the capabilities, the mindset, and are afforded the resources to be able to do so. And so we do a disjustice to our youngsters when we, as a society, our civic leaders, our political leaders, our governmental leaders, and all those above who don't provide the quality resources that youngsters need. Something as simple as computers. In my day, there were no computers in the school. We had things called key punch cards, which was a whole room full of computer equipment that you had to do so many things just to have it say hello. Now youngsters have tablets, they have home computers, they have personal computers. Your phone is a computer. And so we have a responsibility again to provide our youngsters with the resources that are going to arm them or put them in a position so that they can be successful. They're already at a deficit because they are not getting nutritional value items to eat. They're not in a safe, nurturing environment in a lot of instances. The violence plagues their neighborhoods. Their home life could be in chaos. They're not getting mental health treatment or even mental health acknowledgement in some instances, which puts them at a deficit as well. So at the very least, what we can do is provide them with an educational system or an educational environment that is at least going to address a lot of those issues, that is at least is going to put those issues or those things in the forefront or put them out there so someone can at least notice them and put in some kind of action that is going to at least help them make it to the next level. And we have to support those who have chose to educate our youngsters. It's very important. I think I rank that position up there with doctors and lawyers and all of the high powered positions or careers or jobs that people have, because all of those people that are those doctors and lawyers and educators and scientists and all of those careers, they had to be taught at a young age. They had to be taught from the beginning. And that's where your entree or entry into society begins. That's when you first have your socialization. That's when you first have your opportunity to be somewhat independent. You know, you're spending the time with your mom or your dad or your family, and now you're outside of the house environment. Usually, that's the first time a youngster is away from their parents for any significant amount of time, and they have to learn to be a little independent. They have to learn to get along. They have to learn to listen to someone other than their family members. They have to learn to socialize. They have to learn to take care of themselves, go to the restroom on their own, make friends, learn, integrate themselves into society. And that's so important. Those core years are so important. So we don't want to take advantage of the teachers, because we know that the teachers are a vital part of what we do and what we need as a society in order to help our children. And then unfortunately, we look at the resources in our inner city and some of our impoverished areas where the situations are not as glamorous, they're not as uplifting, they're not as productive as they are in some other communities. You look at inner city Chicago, Inglewood, Austin, North Austin, all of those areas, Humboldt Park and things where some of the resources are not, and then you look at a Niles and Skokie or some of those others, River Forest, and other areas which have such outstanding school systems, Homewood, Flossmoor, to name a few, that have such outstanding school systems, and they have so many activities, so many programs, so many things that build a whole rounded approach to nurturing the youngsters. You know, fencing, volleyball, radio stations, things of that nature. And the list goes on and on. But the important thing is that all children are not going to go to college. That's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. It's always been that way. But at least we could together. And then Dr. Forte said it so eloquently when he was here a few weeks back. We used to have the vocational programs, and now you don't see the vocational programs in the school systems anymore. Auto shop, things of that nature. Either if it was tailoring or dressmaking or something of that nature, or culinary and those things, we need to put those back into our school system so that youngsters have an option. They have a career. They can go out while they're in high school and potentially secure some type of employment and hopefully get an internship or something like that, or be an entree into a college or a vocational situation where they get some credit for that. So we have a responsibility to really, really, really help our youngsters become all that they can be from an educational standpoint. And I think the very important part of that is ensuring that the educators and those who are entrusted with the lives of our youngsters and the resources of our youngsters and the educational aspects of our youngsters are put in a position where they get what they need. And I don't know all of the pros and cons, or even some of the issues that they may be feeling or that they may be dealing with. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that they need to come to the table and do what's in the best interest of our children. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and hopefully wind it up. And I thank you for being in tune to us today. And so we'll be back in a second. Yeah, you can play something. We're back. Took a little break, sip a little water. Mouth got dry, but that's okay. I want to talk about the new police superintendent, the interim police superintendent. I believe Joe or John, I can't think of his name, but he's been a 28-year veteran, and he's been picked by Mayor Rahm Emanuel to head the police department, and he's also looking at him as being a permanent police superintendent. There were some guys that were in the running. I think there were two African American male and one female from out of state. And you have people on both sides of the field that say, in one instance, they say, get somebody from the outside so that we can remain transparent because of all the police violence and the Commander Berg's things that have occurred during the past years. But also there's people on the other side that say, hey, this guy who they selected knows Chicago. He knows the people. He's risen from the ranks. He's well respected in the ranks. He's well respected by the union, which I saw on news and in print. And I'm sorry, I cannot call this guy's name. And he is a guy and an articulate guy. He's a family man. He's the community people talk highly of him. And so I think we have a chance to maybe move into a direction where he can get some things done because he's respected across the board. Congressman Danny Davis, Congressman Bobby Rush all support that selection. The mayor seems to be appreciative of that selection. There's some controversy of the other candidates who, and one guy who said, I believe he's from Atlanta, and I may be mistaken, but he said the mayor had offered him the job and then rescinded the job. And the mayor said that's not true. He never offered that job. But I think the mayor did yield to pressure because of two things. Number one, someone of color was going to be selected, I do believe, because there was a lot of controversy, especially with the last two police superintendents prior to the the Hispanic superintendent who was in an interim role, Jody Wees and McCarthy, being of the Caucasian persuasion and not having the sensitivity or the knowledge base or the ability to interact with some of the police and some of the police agencies or fraternal order of police and things of that nature. And so now they found that they could possibly have somebody that can really relate and can interact with the guys. And from what all things we are hearing, I've watched several news programs, I've read several news articles. He's one of the guys, a tough guy, a disciplined guy, a guy that knows the business of being the police, but also knows the business of administration. So we can look at hopefully some budgetary things being set in place. We can look at some culture shifts. We can look at some protocol and policy things on how we handle things. You know, we've been in the spotlight quite a bit lately with the shootings and also the violence in the community. And to have someone that probably knows firsthand how these things go and what these things are all about should be a coup for our mayor and as well as our city. And so we're looking at our new police superintendent with open arms, but we're looking at him with wide open eyes as well, not rose-colored glasses, because we want it not to be super tough, but we want him to be able to deal with the harsh and the hard issues that approach or appear in our society, especially in the city of Chicago. If we can get some interaction, I saw one police officer who has a youth basketball league and those type of things. When I was coming up, we knew our police officers. We knew Officer Friendly who would come to the schools and talk to the youth. And so that disconnect or that separation didn't exist as it does now. Of course, you're going to always have those who don't like police, and you're going to also have those bad police. And so there's a combination of both, but somewhere in the middle lies the truth. There are a lot of good police officers. I've been approached by a lot of good police officers who've gone above and beyond to assist and help out when they didn't have to, just because they were decent people. But I've also run across some that weren't, and they had issues of their own. But far and wide, I believe that my interaction has been more favorable than negative. And I look at that, and you want to support them because, hey, when something happens, you're calling them into your home or into your place of business or into your community to help you. And the better relationship you have, the more apt they are to help you, but also the more comfortable you'll feel when you have somebody, hey, I see Officer such and such on a regular basis. He stops and talks with the youth. He stops and interacts with the community, the business leaders, and things like that. You know, you see the guys on the bicycles throughout the various areas. You see the guys on the horses in the downtown locations and some of the park districts. So I think it's very, very, very important that we give him a shot. We give him a chance. You know, we can always say we don't like him if he doesn't do what we know he can do, but also he's got to be given the tools and given the ammunition, so to speak, not necessarily weapons, ammunitions, but the products and the items that he needs to make the tough choices, but also be able to produce and take care of the things. Get rid of the rotten cops, increase the good cops, get rid of the bureaucracy, increase the accountability, but also the transparency of the Chicago Police Department, and also have that openness where he can be criticized, but also where he can be praised. Because if he's doing a great job, we want to make sure we let him know that, so that he can in turn let his officers know, and they can in turn better serve our communities. We're going to close it out now, guys. It's been a wonderful time. We apologize for our guest not being here, but we pray for him and hope that all is well with him. And we'll try to get him here on the next round. This is your host, J Jack. You've been in tune to Common Talk here on IntellectualRadio.com, and we are out.